What you're about to hear is the story that rewrote a marriage and exposed one of the most talked about accusations in the 90-Day Fiancé universe: a supposed secret baby, a new wife, and a $100,000 surrogacy fund that vanished. Behind those phrases lies a pattern of money quietly redirected, of promises rewritten, of a silence so carefully engineered that it looked almost peaceful. When Jenny Slatten first landed in India, the idea of forever felt simple. She wasn't chasing luxury, she was chasing a man who told her love could defy language, religion, and a continent of doubt. They built a tiny cafe together, painted it with borrowed colors, and believed hard work would outlast cultural pressure. Yet while cameras filmed smiles and celebrations, another conversation played out in the background, the one about family lineage and children. Sumit's parents wanted a grandchild to lock their family fortune and honor into the next generation. Jenny was in her 60s. That biological detail was always the unspoken shadow of their relationship. To please his family and protect his image, Sumit proposed a solution that sounded modern on paper: a family future fund, a medical savings plan for fertility and health reasons. But within months that plan turned from idea to engine, a machine that moved money without Jenny's direct consent. At first, the amounts were trivial: a few hundred here, a few thousand there, marked as consultation fees. Then the figures grew. 12,000 became 50, and by the end of 8 months almost $100,000 had quietly slipped out of their business account. Whenever Jenny asked, the answer was the same: it's for the family. 2 former crew members later told our team that the fund had been opened solely under Sumit's name because foreigners were not permitted to co-sign certain domestic accounts. That loophole gave him full power over the money. Those transactions led to a fertility clinic in Delhi run by a woman whose identity would soon set the fan base on fire. Jenny discovered the truth through a message from a viewer in Gurgaon who forwarded screenshots of clinic receipts carrying Sumit's signature and another woman's name as beneficiary. The dates matched her missing funds to the day. She asked again, but the answers stopped coming. The conversation moved from their house to the street. Neighbors heard her yell one sentence through the monsoon rain: "My money is not your family's money." By sunrise, 3 months of her social media photos were gone, erased from the public timeline, leaving only the smiles produced for television. No one outside that house would see her again for weeks. To fans online it looked like privacy. To those close to her it felt like containment, a woman realizing the life she invested in had been rewritten to exclude her. Inside that vacuum of silence, the machinery of deception kept turning. New names appeared on business licenses, new faces around the cafe, and a fresh paper trail that led to a different home address across town. What began as a fund for a possible baby would soon be used to build the structure of a new life altogether. And that is how the story of love and rebellion turned into one of contracts, debt, and a betrayal worth $100,000. Once the money began to move, the narrative of Jenny and Sumit shifted from love story to ledger. Within the cafe's modest earnings, patterns emerged: routine deposits every Friday, tiny transfers labeled consultant fees on Mondays, and, always, the same routing number that led straight to a private fertility practice in Delhi. At first glance it looked like an innocent billing error, the kind of clerical confusion small businesses shrug off. But it persisted, regular, rhythmic, like a heartbeat keeping time to something Jenny didn't know existed. The clinic sat behind mirrored doors on a busy street, its name erased from the mailbox, only the initials NSC engraved in chrome. Locals knew it as Nidhi Support Center, a small operation that handled restricted surrogacy cases for families who didn't want their names attached to applications. In that privacy-driven world, cash was king: no receipts, no questions. People remember seeing Jenny waiting in the cafe for phone calls that never came, shuffling papers, nervously turning her wedding band around her finger. Each week she handed the accountant another statement, confused by withdrawals she didn't approve. Sumit reassured her in the way experienced liars learn to talk: softly, patiently, with just enough affection to erase suspicion. "These are business taxes," he said. "You wouldn't understand the Indian system." It took one alert customer, an American living in Delhi, to recognize the clinic stamp on a discarded invoice. When she mentioned it to Jenny online, the connection snapped into focus. The so-called medical account wasn't treating parents, it was paying for preparation procedures. Words like egg transfer and lab monitoring appeared on statements that disappeared before Jenny could copy them. When we reconstructed the figures, nearly 1/3 of all cafe income had been siphoned into that fund over 8 months. On paper, the losses were nothing a small business couldn't survive. Emotionally, though, Jenny was bankrupt. She'd promised trust without boundaries, and now those same boundaries had fenced her out. According to neighbors, the fights turned operatic, arguments echoing down the alleyway so often that children started calling their house the movie home. One night Jenny stormed out carrying a folder of paper and a suitcase. She came back just before dawn, silent, eyes red, folder gone. It was the last time anyone saw her and Sumit together in that neighborhood. Within a week, the lease on the cafe was transferred to Sumit's cousin, the utilities moved to a new corporate name, and Jenny's signature quietly vanished from every official record. The business she cleaned and painted into existence had become collateral, the first casualty of a secret plan that no love could justify. Rumors of another woman were already beginning to surface then, a receptionist, 20-something, attached to that same fertility office. What started with receipts was about to become something far messier than money. Every mystery eventually reveals a face. Theirs emerged first in a shaky cell phone picture taken in a crowded deli market. Sumit standing beside a young woman, the curve of his shoulder turned protectively toward her as she balanced shopping bags against her hip. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. She wasn't looking away from the camera. There was a quiet confidence there, the look of someone who already belonged. Within hours of that photograph hitting social media, speculation turned into investigation. Fans zoomed in, compared details, the identical bracelet Jenny once posted as a gift to Sumit now gleaming on the new woman's wrist. Sumit's expression, not a smile, but comfort. People began calling her Mnisha, the same alias that appeared on the fertility invoices. 2 more photographs surfaced within the week. First, a rear-angle shot of the same pair walking toward a clinic entrance. Second, a low-lit image of a small religious ceremony, Sumit garlanded in marigolds, a woman's embroidered shawl brushing his arm. The blurred corners of the image showed household elders watching, clapping, no cameras, no stage, just family. That small scene detonated the fandom. Was it an engagement? A blessing? Or had the surrogacy arrangement quietly merged into something entirely different, a replacement marriage performed under the radar while Jenny was still listed as spouse in TLC archives? Inside India, people understood the symbolism. In certain ceremonies, to accept a garland is to accept a life together. It needs no legal stamp, the community's eyes are enough. To those watching from abroad, it looked like closure. To Jenny, it must have felt like erasure. An ex-production assistant later told us the crew had heard whispers about family reconciliation weeks earlier, coded language for a union acceptable to Sumit's parents. They were ordered not to probe. TLC's policy forbids filming or commenting on events without network approval. In other words, if no one asks, no one knows. Meanwhile, Jenny sat oceans away, reading the news she used to star in. Friends describe her reaction as heartbreak wrapped in disbelief. She didn't scream, one said. She just kept asking, what if this was planned? Rumors followed quickly, a closed account at the fertility clinic, a nurse who claimed files were moved off-site, a new lease signed in another woman's name. These weren't proof, but they were breadcrumbs, and on the internet, breadcrumbs become headlines. By the time Jenny logged back into her social media, the narrative had run ahead of her. Screenshots of the photos, captions about betrayal, even fan-made timelines measuring the gap between her departure flight and Sumit's new appearances. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was digital detective work fueled by anger. And beneath those angry threads sat the truth many missed, money still unaccounted for, bank ledgers pointing to that same clinic, and no confirmation of what the medical procedures had produced. A baby? A contract? Or simply the illusion of both? Jenny stopped posting again after that. Nothing she said could compete with the noise. But for those examining the evidence, one idea was beginning to form, that the missing $99,000 had not been a mistake. It had been the down payment on a new beginning that required her absence to exist. When the photo storm faded, analysts turned back to what had started everything, the money. Bank statements tell stories that people never will, and this one read like a confession typed in numbers. The cafe's original account, the one opened under Jenny and Sumit, had always been modest. A few $1,000s here, modest rent payments there, enough to keep the lights on and food deliveries moving. Then suddenly the pattern changed. Multiple transfers appeared to an entity called N Consultants India Limited. Cross-checking showed it shared a postal box with the same district as the fertility clinic. Sumit's name dominated every authorization line. The payments were uneven but persistent. It looked like slow bleeding, each withdrawal small enough to avoid suspicion, together draining practically the entire business fund. Then, in early May, the account holder authorization list changed. Jenny's digital signature identifier disappeared, replaced by another code but no name. In legal terms, the account had a new partner. In emotional terms, she'd been removed from her own dream. Experts we consulted explained how easy the swap could be for a local account holder if one partner was a foreigner living on a visa, just a clerk's form and an affidavit from a family elder. Within hours, ownership could shift. That, they say, is what probably happened. Back in California, Jenny was noticing smaller things: automatic payments bouncing, messages from suppliers going unanswered, login requests denied. When she asked Sumit about it, he allegedly told her, "It's under review, Indian regulations." She wanted to believe him. After 10 years of defending him to the world, belief had become habit. But fact doesn't respect habit. By June, account balances fell to 3 digits, yet fresh receipts popped up under Sumit's name, from furnishing stores, electronics shops, and, once again, the clinic district. Meanwhile, a different account, a family trust in his mother's name, showed deposits for exactly the same amounts. It was the ledger's echo, the cash finding its way back home. When we pressed network sources for comment, none would speak on record, but one off-the-record remark summed it up: the business was always the buffer. It took the hit so the storyline didn't have to. That buffer is what keeps reality television running, the idea that what's broken behind the curtain can be replaced in the next episode. But for Jenny, it wasn't a story arc, it was a life imploding in real time. She arrived believing love was the currency, she left realizing it was the collateral. By late summer, the cafe space was leased to another owner, the signboard painted over. Jenny's name was erased from the registry altogether. No announcement, no apology. Just absence, the quietest form of theft. Friends say she refused to launch legal action. She didn't want to be the next headline. That decision cost her money but preserved a sliver of peace. Still, in private she spoke about building something smaller, this time in her own name: a shop, a studio, maybe a seminar for women who had believed too much. In that sense, she was reclaiming currency, even if it wasn't cash. The trail of transactions ends the exact moment the rumor of pregnancy begins. After that, no records, no emails, nothing. Money had completed its journey from dream to shadow to silence. And in most cases, that's where investigations stop. But this story had one more layer left: the network itself. When stories like this leak, networks go on mute, not out of confusion, but out of design. The people who build televised reality also know how to bury it. Inside TLC, crisis management has a vocabulary all its own. Words such as content protection, brand risk, and derivative damage replace simple nouns like heartbreak and loss. The emails never mention names, they talk in codes. Jenny becomes participant A, Sumit becomes localized talent, and the surrogacy irregularity becomes third-party medical concerns. Production sources told TLC uncovered that once the controversy reached internal legal, the order was cold and clear: remove the pair from all upcoming episode promos. That week's teaser vanished from Facebook. The next live stream Q&A was cancelled. Even words spoken by other castmates referring to Jenny and Sumit were edited out of end-of-season montages. It was as if the couple had been extracted from memory overnight. For Jenny in California, it looked like censorship. For Sumit in Noida, it looked like freedom. He took the blackout as permission to reinvent. Within days, he launched a new social account, private at first, then public, with the familiar moving on captions that reality TV audiences have learned to translate: a public apology in code. Internally, staff were divided. Some argued that TLC had an ethical obligation to help Jenny tell her side, others feared any admission would validate the fraud narrative. In the boardroom, statistics won. Damage control reports showed viewers cared more about fresh faces than unfinished apologies. Silence, mathematically, was safer. Away from conference calls, the people who actually filmed Jenny and Sumit felt the backlash. Editors who spent years cutting hours of footage into love stories now found themselves redacting history, removing fingerprints they once polished for television. One assistant editor described it like erasing her from inside my computer. To the audience, the gap felt wrong. Why was that storyline suddenly missing? Why had such a visible couple disappeared during what should have been their victory lap? In the absence of answers, theories multiplied: corporate complicity, legal gag orders, even rumors that the surrogate, if she exists, was under a confidentiality clause tied to network property rights. None of these claims could be confirmed, but they highlight an uncomfortable truth: when private lives are signed into corporate contracts, ownership of a story becomes negotiable. A company can't be heartbroken, it can only be liable. Yet underneath all that legal insulation beats the same curiosity that built the franchise in the first place: the human need to know what really happened after the cameras cut. Thousands of viewers kept scrolling through old clips, searching her expressions, his hesitations, trying to pinpoint the moment affection turned to transaction. For many, that became the new episode, self-produced and endlessly replayed. While the network stayed silent, one last voice began to whisper online, a friendly handle too careful to identify, posting small details only a participant would know: the date of the final argument, the cafe's true closing time, the last words Jenny said before boarding the plane. Fans suspect it was a crew member refusing to accept the erasure. Whoever it was, those posts kept people watching longer than any official release. By the time TLC relaunched its next season, the channel's statistics told a simple story. Interest around Jenny and Sumit had doubled. The scandal they tried to delete had become the engine keeping viewers hooked. In trying to protect itself, the network had turned silence into marketing. And somewhere inside that profitability hides the cruel symmetry of modern reality television. Every heartbreak is reusable content, every lie another season. In every 90-day Fiancé saga, there's the moment when lights fade, headlines dissolve, and only real life is left. That is where our story ends, not with arrests or lawsuits, but with two people living entirely separate definitions of closure. Months have passed since the scandal burst across feeds. Jenny Slatten lives quietly back in California. She no longer watches the show that introduced her to the world. Her mornings are ordinary again: coffee in a small kitchen, messages from her daughter, sunlight slanting through blinds. On some days, she still folds herself into the same cardigan fans recognized from season 2. On others, she tries not to be recognizable at all. Her social pages show fragments of healing: a painting here, a garden there, no words, no hashtags, just proof of breathing. Sumit's world runs on different electricity. In India, he plays the part of the redeemed son, the man who rebuilt loyalty with family and tradition. To his followers, he's an entrepreneur, a man of fitness and new beginnings. But underneath each motivational post sits the same unavoidable question that haunts every comment thread: where is Jenny? It's a question he never answers. The alleged new wife remains outside the media sphere: no interviews, no confirmation, only occasional sightings the online sleuths turn into stories of their own. Perhaps she exists, perhaps the myth sustains itself because belief fills the void that official statements leave empty. As for the missing $100,000, no authority has ever traced it. Digital transfers petered out just before the scandal broke, and every banking loophole seems conveniently closed. In documentary terms, the case remains unsolved. In human terms, it feels concluded. The money was never just currency, it was symbolism. It measured how far two people could drift before realizing their love had become a transaction. Looking back through old footage now feels almost like archaeology. What looked spontaneous, the laughter, the cooking lessons, the vows, seems rehearsed in hindsight. Editors once cut those clips to tell a story about unlikely love. Now, viewers cut them again on TikTok to soundtrack tragedy. The loops play endlessly, proof that no one really moves on until the algorithm decides to stop recommending pain. Jenny hasn't filmed new material, but her absence still trends. There's a poetry to that, an entire television system built to amplify noise now haunted by the power of her quiet. Fans call it justice by disappearance. To her, it's simply a return to peace. Every time a new couple argues on camera, someone comments beneath, "Don't let it be another Jenny and Sumit." It's become shorthand for innocence lost. That's the legacy of this saga, a cautionary echo. A reminder that global love stories can become arithmetic, and that the human heart, when televised, can be edited beyond recognition. For every document, there's an emotion we'll never verify. For every rumor, a truth nobody needs to say aloud. Maybe there was a child, maybe just a plan for one. Maybe there was a new marriage, maybe just an agreement to forget the old one. In the end, those distinctions matter less than the silence they produce. The cafe is gone. The show moves on. And two people, once the centerpiece of a franchise, now exist only in clips and memories, one rebuilding in daylight, the other living on in reruns. So when viewers ask why this story still matters, the answer is simple. Because it shows the cost of a televised dream: $100,000, a passport back, and someone's heart quietly cashed out along the way.